Branding and performance marketing at first glance are like water and oil. They don't mix very well. And yet, that's exactly where you'll find the key to your acquisition strategy. Indeed, on one side, there's branding with a strong brand, a recognizable identity, and the trust your visitors and customers place in you. And on the other side, there's performance marketing, where everything is measurable, KPIs are tightly monitored, and you can track things from start to finish. But when we talk about branding, what examples can we give? There are thousands, and you probably already know the ones I'm about to mention. The most classic examples would be Apple and Louis Vuitton, for instance. The strength of these brands is that they have an extremely strong identity, and everyone knows them. And when we are in the process of making a purchase decision, inevitably, they come to mind at one point or another. How did they manage to get to that point? Quite simply, they bought a lot of space, a lot of advertising space, massive display ads and things everywhere so that we'd be bombarded and sure to remember them for the rest of our lives. And from an ROI perspective, what does it look like when you do branding like Louis Vuitton or Apple? It's complicated to measure. Unfortunately, having large ad spaces in airports or on the Champs-Élysées is something that is extremely expensive and quite difficult to measure. You see those huge billboards, everyone sees them, but you don't really know who actually saw them and who ends up buying afterwards. If you want a pretty iconic example of why branding is hard to measure, and how do we end up in these situations? We can take, for example, Apple's pretty iconic 1984 commercial. We end up with Ridley Scott directing it, which is pretty crazy, and it results in a stunning commercial, of course, one that's still being studied even today. But how do you calculate the ROI of having Ridley Scott and his direction instead of a more traditional commercial? Pretty complicated. And so, the impact we still see today from studying that commercial is very significant, but how did they manage to measure it? Calculating that, back then, in terms of the ROI for the advertising done for Apple products, one of the sectors where branding is most heavily used is clearly the luxury sector. Why do we see so much branding in the luxury sector? Because unfortunately, in the luxury sector, we're not selling utility. We're obviously selling a dream, we're selling a need, we're selling a desire. And so we need to do branding, we need to have a strong identity, to have people who love the brand so they can identify with it. Steve Jobs notably said that the brand, it's the most valuable investment we can make in our company for our product in the long term. We also have Donald Trump, who recently said that if our company isn't a brand, it remains a commodity. And that's quite true. The problem with performance marketing, which we'll look at later, is that unfortunately, we position ourselves as a commodity, but we track extremely well. Because indeed, spending thousands of euros on big displays everywhere, it's nice when you're already loaded, and you can do marketing and spend money without worrying too much about ROI. But if you need to get a return on investment because you don't have the wealth of Croesus, then in that case, performance marketing becomes a bit more interesting. What happens when you put €1 into Google ads or Meta ads? How much do you get back? That's the real question we'll end up asking ourselves after all. I was recently talking with Guillaume, who is the e-commerce director at Interflora, and he told me that they manage marketing investments based on the margin generated. That is, for every euro invested, they analyze and track it. Thank you. What margin did it generate? How many euros did it generate in terms of margin and profit? That's really what we call performance marketing tracking within performance marketing. And the question is kind of the question of ROAS. Basically, for every euro invested, how much are we going to get back? And the minimum we could set for ourselves, in big quotation marks, would be 2 for 1. That is to say, for every euro invested, we get 2 back. What is the maximum we could get? Now, the maximum is another story. For example, there's Alex Hormozi, a major US influencer who often boasts about generating an average of 36 euros in revenue for every euro invested in ads. To give you a little personal anecdote, when I was at Cdiscount, we could really see the different levers that were more performance-oriented. Performance marketing versus the different levers that were focused on branding. Indeed, there was a team, for example, that was dedicated to paid search, meaning basically Google ads. And so with them, you could really see that they managed the margin on each campaign, on every click, on every product, and so on. And for them, profit was the only thing that mattered. Similarly, there was also the social ads team who were focused on paid traffic for the social side, meaning social media. And they were also very margin-oriented, managing for profit and so on. You could really see, by the way, that their work was very analytical. They were very focused on what the ROI was for each product for every campaign we ran. In SEO, we tried as best we could to calculate all that, but unfortunately, due to the latency we had with that channel and so on, we were kind of in between. We had a long-term vision, we knew we were going to generate growth, but it was quite complicated to know if we were going to have an extremely positive ROI on each of the actions we took. Finally, the last team, which was really the most long-term oriented team, for example, was a team called the branding team, which was in charge not really of having a short-term ROI or calculating the performance of each of their actions, but rather a long-term vision of how to maximize the strength of the brand that was Cdiscount, how to build a stronger identity with consumers and succeed in gaining greater trust as well. So the whole performance marketing part may not be as sexy as Steve Jobs. And the fact is, investing in your brand is the only way to achieve the best long-term ROI. But in any case, it's an approach that is extremely functional in the short term and allows you to gradually calculate your ROI for each action, which is still quite reassuring. And it can help avoid disasters where you send thousands or even millions of dollars into campaigns that ultimately serve no purpose. But then, that's a very macro approach. So how do we do it from a micro perspective? What are the levers attributed to performance and which ones are attributed to branding? Quite simply, for me, the most performance-oriented lever is affiliation. Affiliation is a lever where you get paid for every customer you bring in. So you really know the ROI you're going to get for each customer, or at least you're pretty sure, since you'll be paying, in this case, often a percentage of the revenue you generate. So for example, in affiliation, it can happen that we pay 50% of the revenue generated by the client, which will be paid directly to the person who brought them to us, so to our affiliate. Here you can really see that there is no branding approach. Branding, we remain a commodity. Our affiliate, the person who sends us traffic, will just send it to us. We convert and pay the affiliate back. We only pay if we profit, making it purely performance-based. The second lever, also very performance-oriented in my opinion, is Google Ads, specifically the search part. So search ads, paid search, it's not a place where you can do a lot of branding because there aren't many visuals, etc. There are 3 or 4 of us advertising in the same place. Whoever gets the click, and then it's up to them to convert it. We all pay more or less the same price per click in this area. The goal is then to be as efficient as possible at converting directly on the site. But overall, we end up with something that's very performance-oriented because we don't have much space to get messages across or to build an identity. We don't have any visuals. It's very basic and also very effective if we're focusing on search performance. A channel that usually falls right in the middle is emailing. Emailing, where we have the possibility to do something that sticks more. Top of mind, sending emails just to stay in people's minds. This allows for a whole approach that's more branding-oriented, but still remains fairly measurable. And in the end, you can carry out performance marketing actions with emailing that are extremely precise. And so these actions in general are going to be more performance-oriented. Performance. So for me, emailing is a bit more on the performance side, but there's still a decent opportunity to do branding. So overall, it's a good lever, but you do need to have your email list. Next, when we get a bit closer to branding, we have influencer marketing. For me, influencer marketing was something where you could achieve a lot of performance back in 2014, when it was still an underutilized lever. Now that it's a channel that's being used to its full potential, let's say, we know that the ROI from influencer marketing is going to take longer. In the long term, influencers, they have a short-term ROI, but above all, they have a longer-term ROI. It's rare to break even 100% using only influencer marketing. It's something that will help to showcase your product, your brand, your identity, and connect it to values. The values of the influencers, precisely. So it's very interesting for the long term, but for the very short term, it's not necessarily the best of the best. The last lever, which is very branding oriented, we've already talked about it, is display, massive display. If you do display advertising in airports, if you put up huge 4x3 billboards on the Champs-Élysées, that's when you're really focusing on branding. You put up big images, you use large visuals, you create an identity. The next time you're in an airport, look around you and ask yourself this question. All those brands are engaging in branding. Because in fact, it's mostly wealthy people who are in airports. And branding is often something for the rich. But what about SEO? Here I am with my Google t-shirt, talking to you about all these levers. And I'm not even talking about my favorite lever, which is SEO. In fact, as it happens, my name is Leo Putvin and I run an SEO agency. We help our clients, whether it's for performance or branding, to succeed in SEO and improve their rankings on Google. SEO, we've already talked about it a bit earlier, but it has its advantages and disadvantages in terms of performance and branding. Indeed, SEO has a certain latency, so it's quite complicated to precisely calculate the ROI of each SEO action we take in order to know whether each action pays off or not. But SEO is also the lever that ends up having the most profitable ROI in the long term. In fact, it's the lever where you need to invest continuously, and in the end, you end up creating a cash machine, an ROI machine that gradually lowers your acquisition costs, and you build on that. So that's a big advantage compared to marketing performance, which unfortunately is very performance-oriented and in the end offers little to build on. What is SEO from a performance perspective? SEO from a performance perspective basically is about ranking for the name of the thing you're selling. For example, I'm currently working with an e-commerce business that sells weightlifting equipment. And when I personally rank their site for buy weights weightlifting, that's performance we're achieving. In fact, there's very little branding involved in that. The goal for him is to capture clicks from people with search intent, people who are looking to convert, to buy weightlifting equipment and then convert them. There's little room to guide people or to create a lot of awareness. Here, we're mainly focused on performance. On the other hand, if we take a more branding-oriented approach, what happens then? For example, if we rank for mid or top funnel keywords, performance is generally very bottom funnel, meaning people who are very close to the buying journey, to the end of the purchase process. If we move to the mid funnel, for instance, we could target a buying guide, like how to choose your dumbbells. Someone who is looking to choose dumbbells might be interested, they'll see our brand, we'll start to get into their mind, and that's going to be interesting. We can even go further up the funnel, like how to stay healthy. And in that case, we might say, exercise, use dumbbells, do strength training, build your body, and all of that will help you be healthier. Then we'll redirect them. If you don't know how to choose your dumbbells, here's a buying guide to help you choose. And then, if you're satisfied with the buying guide and you know which ones you want to pick, here are the dumbbells we sell directly. Another player, for example, who performs extremely well in branding and SEO in the US is HubSpot. HubSpot has an amazing blog that ranks for just about every keyword related to digital marketing. There are times when HubSpot doesn't directly offer a feature, for this lever, etc. But they cover pretty much everything, whether it's definitions, whether it's how to carry out a specific action, whether it's strategy and so on. Their goal is that whenever someone searches for digital marketing, at some point they end up in the HubSpot loop, that they see HubSpot regularly. And so when it comes time to make a purchase decision, HubSpot is inevitably on their mind, scratching at them somewhere at some point. But where should we start if we can take action? Both branding and performance in SEO, bottom and top, on what should we focus? Should we start by emphasizing and putting our efforts on one over the other? What I personally recommend is to start with the bottom. Indeed, that's where we'll see the most immediate ROI. And since SEO is a rather long-term lever, we might as well try to get some ROI quickly. In the end, that will allow us to invest in future growth and then go after the top of the funnel. What example can I give you regarding this? I recently had a client named Pandati who sells tea, and they ranked extremely well on many top funnel keywords such as benefits of verbena, but unfortunately they didn't rank very well on the bottom of the funnel, meaning keywords like buy black tea, for example. So we worked together to see if we could find a way to improve their performance on the bottom of the funnel, which would allow them to get a more immediate and stronger ROI from SEO, rather than just general awareness for their site and brand. This also shows that sometimes hundreds of thousands of clicks aren't necessarily the most interesting thing. The most interesting thing is sometimes just a few clicks, but clicks that actually convert. Indeed, targeting the right traffic in SEO is also something important. And of course, that allows you to focus on what's essential and on your core business, which will then help Google understand what areas you want to expand into. For beginners, how to get started in SEO and what are the basics of SEO, I'm putting it directly on the screen for you. You can check it out if you're interested. With that, I wish you a great day on YouTube. Keep ranking, keep marketing,